Well,
hey everyone, Dr. Brent Siebold here with Make It Happen at Arizona State University and with the Entrepreneurship and Innovation Unit within the Ira A. Fulton Schools of Engineering, as well as Entrepreneurship and Innovation at Arizona State University. Very thrilled to welcome my friend and longtime colleague, Rick Lutweiler. He is a serial innovator, entrepreneur, change maker. He has been a long-serving venture mentor within our Venture Doubles program. And by the way, if any of you in the audience are considering doing a startup of any kind, whether it's nonprofit, more than profit, for-profit, hardware, software, service, you name it, we have an amazing program at ASU to support you. It's called Venture Doubles, and Rick and I have been working in that domain with our colleague Tracy Lee, who runs that program. We have a deadline coming up. It is August 1st. If you're not aware of Venture Doubles, really encourage you to take a part of that. And Rick has worked with a great number of startups that have come through our Venture Doubles program. I'd say, Rick, over the last, 6 or 7 years, maybe closer to five or six, somewhere in that ballpark. Mm-hmm. So I'm really honored to invite Rick to be a part of our Make It Happen series. The goal of these sessions is to give everyone a competitive an advantage in their future careers. So Rick is going to share with us, I'll let him provide a detailed introduction, but the power of intention is going to be one tool that you'll be able to add to your tool belt moving forward after today's talk. So without further ado, Rick, the floor is yours. And again, thanks for being here and glad we can engage.
My pleasure, Brent. And thanks everyone for making some time today. It's fun to be able to share some of my story with you, and I hope it comes across in a way that you can put to work for your particular situation. And I'll start with my story, and again, understanding our focus is on the power of intention, and there's a lot that's been written about intention, and this is just my take on how it has been a part of my life over the years and how I've seen it affect my life. And I thought that would be helpful to share. And then, as you see in the title here, a fair amount of what I'm going to be talking about is about leading with purpose. So it is focused on leadership in some fashion, but that can be leading yourself, leading your group, leading your family, leading an organization. So however that works for you. And to get started, I thought I'd kind of share my story. So since we're in a university setting, I'll start there. I actually went off to college my first year to study accounting. I was 17 years old. I made it through 1 year of college before I ran out of all the money I had for 4 years of college. So I went into the Marines for 3 years because at that time, they would pay for my college at night, and I got about a year's worth of school going at night. And then they had a savings program. For every dollar I put in, they put in $2 of savings, and that could only be used for education when you got out. But hey, it worked. And so I finished my last couple of years at the University of Iowa, and along the way changed from accounting to marketing and human resources. And then went off to start my career. And it's an interesting what that journey took shape, because I started with, at the time, the largest company in the world. It was AT&T, which is way, way, way smaller now. But if you think of Apple and Google and some of these companies that are so large now, that's what AT&T was before there was a government forced divestiture. And so it was a great experience, and I got to do some of the marketing stuff that I wanted to do. But along the way, I met some people that ended up hiring me away. And so then I went down to a company that was only, I guess we were probably 200 or 300 million. And in the 10 years I was with them, we grew from 200 million to 22 billion, which was a crazy, wild ride, but so much fun because we were always doing so many different things. And there were times when I literally had 5 full-time jobs at the same time working for this one company. And it forced you to be very focused and intentional because otherwise you just couldn't get through it. And from there, I progressively found myself going to smaller and smaller companies because I think I just realized that I liked the intimacy that can come with a smaller organization where you can feel like you can have a bigger impact than being, you know, a small fish in a very big pond. And my last corporate job, I won't go through all of them, but the last corporate job was, Brent mentioned startups. I call it the startup that really wasn't, but a multi-billion-dollar organization recruited me to launch a new technology business for them. And to do that, they gave me some software they had created, about 60 people that had been a part of building it and maintaining it and supporting the customers that were currently using it inside their own company. And then they gave me kind of however much money I asked for to launch that business and run that business and try to bring in a lot of big customers for them so that they could make revenue off of what had previously been just an internal tool. And that was just an amazing experience because I literally got to create from scratch a company that had its own branding. We came up with our own branding, our own personality. What did the market look like? How did we want to position ourselves in the market? And then take it forward. And it was such a great learning experience, and we had so much fun, and we had a lot of great success. But at some point, they decided that they wanted to keep that business internal rather than the original plan, which was to take it out and make its own separate public company. They just wanted to maintain the control. So I decided it was time for me to retire or semi-retire. So I headed up to the mountains of very northern California. Brent and I were talking about that earlier. It's a very remote rural area, but we love it. It gives us a lot of nature that we love to be a part of, and yet we're close to a lot of things that we would want to be close to. And throughout that time, I've been working with ASU's Venture Devils program and mentoring on average about 6 startup founders a semester. And those could range across a wide variety of types of businesses and stages of their business. And so it was really interesting to see that grow. And I was happy, you know, I'm doing that. I get to engage with people, learn more about different industries and businesses. But I also got to spend a lot of time on our small ranch up here and spent a lot of time working on it, improving it, and then trying to take advantage of the fact that in 3 minutes I can walk out my back door and be at a fly fishing river. So I didn't want to make it all work and no play. And then interestingly, a few months ago, someone reached out to me and said, hey, we're looking for a CEO. And I said, well, I'm not really looking for a full-time job. I'm happy, you know, with what I've got going. And they said, oh, well, no, this is a part-time CEO job. And I kind of scratched my head a little bit and said, well, okay, I'll at least listen. And I'll fast forward that about 6 weeks ago, I took on the part-time CEO role for a company that's in the forensic evidence business. And I won't go into the details of that, but it's been interesting after a 3-year break to go back into running a business. And again, one of the smaller ones I've ever been involved in, and start to apply some of these things that I've been carrying with me. So that's kind of my story. I'd like to now talk about, I want to bring this intention part in and share a story. So as we were planning to move up here from Arizona, we've been for quite a while, and we were downsizing. My wife says, well, can you go through this set of folders that we have in our filing cabinet? I said, I didn't even know I had folders there. Sure. And I pulled out a folder, and it was a document from 40 years prior when I was with AT&T, and they had asked me to write down 3 major goals for my life. Could have been anything I wanted them to be. And as I was reading these, I was looking and thinking, one, I don't really remember writing these down, but obviously I did. And some of it seemed like, okay, that resonates. I knew I always had that focus in my life. And other parts didn't, but clearly it was sitting in there. And so one of them was to make a certain amount of money a year. And it's kind of irrelevant at this point because all of us have different goals, and it was 40 years ago. But suffice to say that I had far surpassed that, making that amount per money per year, so goal reached. The other one, second one, was to travel the world. And while I would still love to see a lot more of the world, we've already been to, I think, 31 countries so far. And I treasure that experience. And again, would love to do some more. And we go off to visit our daughter in Australia whenever we can, and still love to get over some more time in Europe and Asia. And then the third one, which was so interesting because we were again packing to move from Arizona, the 7th largest city in the country, to this place in California, which has 13,000 people in an area the size of Phoenix. And the third thing on there was to live on a ranch. And I literally did not remember before then that that was something that was in my heart 40 years before, but here we're packing up to move to our very small ranch in the mountains of Northern California. So there is just a power of getting focused internally, physically, logically documented, and sometimes you're aware of what you're still focused on, and sometimes you lose track of it, but it's still there. So let's kind of jump into that. So first of all, when I say living with intention, I'll first of all say I really don't think this is the norm, because if you think about it, a lot of our day is spent, we're replying to emails, we're responding to calls and texts, and kind of reacting to whatever we see, hear, or feel. And it's not that that's bad, it's just not very powerful. It's not the most effective way that we can use our time to achieve what's important to us. So how is that different? Well, when you're living with intention, one, you respond differently, or maybe you don't respond at all. Because think about it, if you're just casually looking on Facebook or Instagram, or just going through your emails or stuff, you may just decide that you're going to respond to something, or you may respond in a certain way. But if you are looking at those things with a focus and an intention, then you're going to decide, well, is this even worth my time? If it is, how do I want to respond that reflects what's important to me? And then this is a big thing, I think, that we often forget, that when you are living with intention, you are investing your time rather than spending it. And the distinction I'll make is, and trust me, I spend a lot of my time still, if I'm playing around on Facebook or playing a word puzzle game, or anything like that, I'm just spending my time. I'm not really getting anything out of that. When I'm investing my time, I'm being very intentional about how I'm going to use this time to achieve some goal that is important to me. And there's a big difference. And I think most of us spend far more of our time spending it than investing it. And when you are living with intention, I think you also tend to get better at seeing and also seizing opportunities, because you have this focus, you notice things, you're looking for or absorbing things in a way that channels it into these things that are important to you, and therefore you see them more and you are prepared to seize on the opportunities that you've come across. And in the end, you basically accomplish more and more of what really matters to you. But you've got to, of course, be clear on what that is. So I would say, and this is what I've coached people on, I do some executive coaching as well as the founder mentoring. And I think a big part of it is, one, you have to begin with focus for yourself and the organization that you're working with, and with purpose, and be clear about what those are. So one of the things, especially like, again, reinforce joining this new company, you've got to create clarity regarding what's most important to yourself first, and then to the organization if in fact you're leading one, or you're a part of one, but you want to be having a leadership impact. And that is not as straightforward as you would think, and it doesn't always happen. Because I'll tell you, I joined this company and I asked for, well, show me your strategic plan, and show me your vision statement and mission statement, and what are the company values, and none of that existed. And it wasn't that the company was being run poorly, they just had never taken the time to do that. And if you asked 10 different people the answers to some of those questions about what was important, sadly, you get 10 different answers. And there's just something lost when you don't have everybody aligned on that. So once you have that, you've figured out what it is that, let's say in this case, the organization is going to be focused on, what they're really most important to achieve, then you have to focus yourself and each other, and you have to continue to refocus. So for example, something that I've been doing with this new team, one started with, I asked each person to tell me what were the most important things they would be accomplishing this year. And they kind of struggled with that. And then I said, well, what will be the success criteria that you use to determine how successful you were this year? And they really struggled with that. And my point to them was, well, how do you know, and how do I know whether you're successful if we don't have a clear view of how that would be measured or what we're even trying to track success against? And so that was an important thing for us to document and get people aligned, and to start to show them, what are you aligning your success with? And then how do you measure it, and so forth. And then what I do is every time that I have a one-on-one meeting with people, we have their list of their current key priorities and how we're measuring success for those things and how we're progressing. And then this is an important thing, I think, which I learned way late in the game, but I started to ask not, okay, what have you done, but tell me how you have moved the business forward. And it's interesting that you can get some very different questions, because somebody can say, oh, well, yeah, I completed this task, and I completed this task. But if you say, how did you move the business forward? Or again, I know we're not all getting into the business world, or that's not our focus, but this group or my life or however it is, how did I move forward towards the things that I said were so important? And I think it's interesting the different answers you get, because if they can't translate how completing that task moved the business forward, one, you have to ask, well, then did we need to do the task? And two, did we need to better understand what we were trying to move forward to as you were completing the task? Because again, without that focus, without that intention, you're just going through the motions, and there's a big difference. And I mentioned this earlier, but it is very clear to have success criteria. And give you an example, I was, again, setting my own success criteria in this new role. And I said to the CEO, I said, well, okay, I would think that your success criteria for me would be, one, what's our net income? Because one of the reasons you hired me is to grow the business significantly. One would be my leadership effectiveness. You brought me on to help run this company better than it's been run before. So let's establish some way to look at that. And then specifically, we were looking at introducing new lines of business. So I identified that one of the success criteria would be how much revenue has come in from new sources of revenue. And then what I did is worked with each of the people on the team to come up with something similar for them. And again, I can tell you it's quite a struggle. So it's not unusual for that to not, again, be natural to people, but it is critically important. Now, well, let me pause for a minute, because I've got just a couple little more things to do, but I want to make sure that I'm not just speaking so fast that nobody has a chance to raise a question. So let me pause, and Brent, let me know if you see anything coming up.
Yeah, thanks, Rick. So far, so good. Really appreciate this. So yeah, we did get a one key question from John, who is one of our leaders of the Make It Happen movement. So John asked in the Q&A, the group chat, do you see the power of intention to be a plug and play tool that can be used in all walks of life? And John, feel free to chime in if you'd like to contextualize that now that you've heard a little bit more of the story, because I know you asked that question pretty early on.
No, I think it's still a valid question, a general plug and play that you could pick it up, could use it in engineering, marketing, your life, your church, raising your kids. That's kind of what I mean by plug and play universality.
Yeah, great question.
I think that is a great question, John, and I'd love to actually get your perspective too. I will share mine that I absolutely believe it is. It is, again, in all those situations that you described. For me in my life, what was important, one of the things that we did very intentionally a long time ago was we introduced a Sunday night family night gathering to kind of force our kids to spend time together with us in an engaging way. And we allowed them to bring their friends with them. Well, actually, we had some of those friends through high school, college, and now for 10 years after college, still a part of our family, if you will, because we made that investment of our time and in connecting with them. The same can be true for our experience as youth leaders in church and certainly in business. But John, what came to mind for you as we were talking through this?
Well, what I was thinking about was, you know, I had a little presentation last time, and I kind of see your power of intention as a universal tool, and it can be. Engineers could use it, for example, if you know what your objectives. It doesn't matter what you're doing, what your product is, or what you're trying to accomplish. It just seems like it's a pretty much of a universal tool. So one of the things that I've been trying to emphasize to folks that are in the Make It Happen session is a set of tools that they can put in a tool bag and use them anywhere.
Yeah.
I think it's important that you have that set of tools at the beginning of your career, rather than, you know, an old guy like me looking back and say, gee, I had this old toolbox and it had holes in it and I never did fill it up with tools.
Amen to that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more that it does have that ability to be applied universally. And again, you just have to think about it from the perspective of what's really important to you. And it doesn't matter what the categorization of that is. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and Rick, oh, sorry, Rick, there's one more question from Sarthak. And Sarthak, if you wouldn't mind maybe unmuting yourself, I'll let you, if you're willing, to ask the question in your own words, but it is in chat in case you don't want to do that, that's fine. And then Rick, if you'd like to finish up after we address Sarthak's question, please take over.
Okay.
Sarthak, are you there? Okay.
Hey,
Yeah. Hey, great.
So I've been really focused on what he's been saying, and he spoke about having a vision and goals and a uniform drive for all the employees in a company. So I would just like his insights on how we can apply that on a personal level.
Well, actually, if you will hold on to that thought, I want to take you all there here in just a few minutes. So thank you for that. Let's come back to it.
Great segue, Sarthak.
Yeah,
Good
yeah,
job.
Thank you. Well timed. One thing just before we get there is, I think there's some important things to do along the way, because as you're, again, whether you're leading yourself, a team, your family, whatever it might be, there's some things, again, like as John mentioned, I learned along the way, and I wish I would have learned them a lot sooner. So one is, I think it's hugely important to pursue greatness, but not perfection. And the reason is, one, whether it's an individual or a team, we suffer when we believe the goals are out of reach. And if you have to think about it, perfection is pretty much out of reach. But sometimes we have a hard time letting go of that. We just keep seeing how it could be better and better and better. And that's not a bad thing. But if we just have our expectations set so high, it's very hard for people to feel like that's achievable, again, whether it's individually or as a team. And then you start to lose momentum, because it's just, I'll never get there, is the kind of sense that you get. The other is that if you're chasing perfection, it really limits your ability to accomplish more in other areas you said were important. So if you have 5 things and you're chasing perfection on number 1, you don't have much time left for 2 through 5. But if you say, this is the criteria that's good enough for us to move on to the next thing or the next thing, then you can make more of an impact on a broader scale, and you can always come back and do continuous improvement, and I believe you should, but just not at the risk of holding yourself back in other areas. And then I think another thing is, it's important, and especially if you get into a leadership role, and again, think about it, even if you're just leading yourself through your school, through your career, is make sure your focus is on breaking through barriers and not creating them. And I know we never really intentionally do that, but sometimes we do it. So breaking through barriers, a lot of times we have to, whether it's for ourselves, pushing ourselves to get through some barrier that seems really difficult, or challenging a team to break through something that's difficult, that's important. But sometimes you can set a barrier in there that you're not aware of. It could be the way that you're leading. It could be some limitation that you set in place. It could be that you have set yourself up to be unapproachable in some way. And so people won't let you know that there's something in their way. They're just going to keep hitting their head against the wall trying to break through. So just be thoughtful again, help and focus on breaking through barriers, but be aware of situations where you could actually be creating barriers. And then I think this is an important one I learned actually not until that last company I told you about, the startup. And that was to know when to hold back. And the short story is, I was in a meeting and a team had been working on a big project, and they came and they gave me the outcome, and they'd done a great job. And my mind immediately just went to, oh, well then, you know, can we do this? Can we do this? And what about that? And afterwards, the leader of that team came to me and said, Rick, I love that your mind jumps ahead and you look forward, and those ideas you came up with were great. But did you realize that you demoralized everyone in the meeting? And I said, well, no, what do you mean? And he said, well, they just spent 3 months trying to achieve what they thought you wanted. And even though you said, yes, you did, you immediately came up with 5 other things that made them think, well, gosh, we should have thought about that. Or now we just have more to do and we really don't get to just breathe and enjoy our success. So sometimes you have to know when to hold back and when to just celebrate the success. So getting back to the question that came up before, what I actually want to do is try to help you guys all come up with your own story, if you will, and think about it from the perspective of the one that I told. So the first thing I want you to do right here, right now, and without thinking about it too much, is whether it's on paper, on your phone, on your computer, whatever, write down 3 goals for yourself. And that can be you personally, it can be for your career, it can be for whatever it is that you want, but write down 3 things. And again, don't worry about it. It doesn't have to be perfect, but let's take a pause and do that.
So Rick, I'm really upset because my top 3 goals that I've already written down are in my office on the Tempe campus that is currently locked down as a result of the pandemic. So are you telling me I have to rewrite these goals in my home office as well?
No, you're okay. We'll let you slide on that. Okay, so again, I hope you've taken the time, written those out. Now what I want you to do is, wherever you keep your calendar, block 1 hour this week and make it a time that you actually will use that hour for this purpose. And what I want you to do is go back to those 3 goals and say, okay, these I wrote down on the fly because Rick said I had to, but now I really want to think about this. If I'm really thinking about what's important to me, my career, my company, my education, my whatever it is, what are those 2 things? And again, these are long-term, these are big picture goals. So make sure you block that time. Then what I want you to do is set another time in about, I would say, a month. So you've got your 3 goals now. Later this week, you will spend some time making sure those are really what you want them to be and giving it some more thought. Well, now what you need to do within the next 4 weeks, and again, block that time now or it won't happen, is say, well, if that's where I'm trying to be at some point in the future in my life, what do I need to do in the next 5 years? And not actions to take, but goals to reach. In the next 5 years, if this life set of goals is ever going to become a reality. And again, take some time for that, because you really need to think that through about, well, if I said I'm going to do this, like let's say my thing was about traveling the world, let's say it was to travel to 30 countries. Well, if I haven't traveled to 10 in the next 5 years, maybe I'm off to a bad start, or maybe just hitting 2 in 5 years would be a good start. But it's whatever, again, you've set as a goal. Then within the next few weeks after that, set another time and then say, okay, for 2020, what would I need to accomplish to be on track for my 5-year goals? So you can see that you're kind of backing into this. You said first what was really important. Now, if that's the case, what do I need to do within 5 years to get on my right track for that? Well, if that's the case, then what do I need to do in this year to make sure I'm on the right track? And again, you can see this is all focusing on you being very intentional, because you've identified what's important and you're starting to say, well, then if that's important, I'm going to make sure I'm investing my time enough and in the right way to have a meaningful impact. And then whether you do this at the beginning of the year or you just do it 12 months from now, but what I would challenge you to do is mark a time on your calendar annually and make it a recurring meeting with yourself. And in that, go back and look at your life goals, those long-term goals, the 5-year goals, and then set your new 2021 goals. And keep doing that every year, because what happens is you keep that in front of you. And if nothing changes about your long-term goals or your 5-year goals and so forth, great, that means you're really focused, you're on track. If it changes, well, now at least you can be very intentional along a different path. And again, if you don't know where you're trying to go, you'll never know if you got there. Okay, so that's just kind of a quick way to get yourself started, and I hope that answered the question. If not, we can talk about it some more, but I do really believe that it is, as John said, very universally applied. So you can have goals that talk about a spiritual achievement that you want to reach, a family situation you want to achieve, a career goal, an educational goal, or a combination of all those things. But what's really important is to first look out so far that you won't hold yourself back. Because sometimes we say, oh, well, I can never achieve this, because we're saying in the next year or the next 2 years, and you just know everything that's in your way. But if you say, with my life, this is what I want to accomplish, that takes down some barriers. And then you start to come back in a little closer and say, well, gosh, if that's really good, if I'm going to make that happen, then in the next 5 years, I've got to do these things. And then you back up again and say, well, if that's going to happen, then I got to do this thing in the next 12 months. And it just really helps you kind of get a sense of priority and focus. And though we will always keep spending our time, it will cause us to invest some of our time and invest it in a more productive way. So Brent, that's all I have prepared. At that point, I'm open to all the questions and discussions. I'd love to hear people talk about what this means to them, or if they have questions about it.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Rick, again, for your time and making it happen with us here at Arizona State University. We're very proud to know you and be engaged with you. So I'll kick things off, and I will, again, encourage everybody to either use the chat, or when you're ready, feel free to either raise your hand using the little icon functionality in Zoom, or you can just unmute. We'd love to see your smiling face if you have a webcam enabled. As I mentioned, please feel free to do that. Let Rick or myself know that you've got something to ask or chime in on. But Rick, Gabe, I'll get to you in 1 second. Thanks. It looks like Gabe's ready to rock and roll. He's one of our most prolific change makers at ASU. So excited that Gabe's here. But Rick, I know, this methodology of intentionality that you've shared with us today, it occurred to me that there's actually quite a bit written in this space of being kind of goal-oriented and how to break things down into smaller, actionable items, which I absolutely love. And I try my hardest to subscribe to myself. So I'm curious if there's any kind of key books or blogs or readings that you have really made an impact on you that have helped kind of reinforce this methodology in your own life or your own career that you might be willing to share with us.
Well, I'm going to struggle here in the moment to think of some specifics. I've read a lot of books and articles and talked to a lot of people. I believe there is a book, The Power of Intention, that I recall reading, and it was pretty good. I think and I'll be happy to send you some, and maybe we could post it with
Oh, yeah.
the video, that, because I know I've got some in my mind that I had looked at. And in fact, when the article I wrote on the subject, I did include some links. So I'll go back to that and make sure I share that.
Fantastic.
And
Yeah,
I
I did.
think, you know, what's important, you know, beyond, I'm sorry, I was just gonna say, beyond the goal setting, it's which I think helps ground us, but the other part of it is just being very intentional about what you do with your time and how you engage yourself in situations to make sure it reflects what you're saying is important to you. And I'll give you an example. When I will go to recognize people in a company setting, I don't just say, great job, you know, love the quality of the output you did. I try to be very intentional to focus that on what we said was important to the company. You know, you not only did an amazing job and you really represented our brand well, but this will help us achieve our thought leadership position in the industry, and that's one of our core priorities. And so that, again, is a very intentional way of engaging on a subject that is tied to the goals, but it's beyond just setting the goals. And I hope that helps explain.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I didn't mean to put you on the spot, and I'm excited to
Yeah.
share with everybody too. I appreciate your willingness to follow up with the blog post that you wrote with those citations. I'll paste in the chat. As I mentioned at the outset of today's gathering, we're really excited that we have now begun in earnest to add all of our past Make It Happen speakers to a YouTube playlist. So within that YouTube environment, that'll probably be the spot that will add the link to Rick's blog post on this subject for further reading. So thanks, Rick. And again, I apologize. I didn't give you that question.
That's okay.
So Gabe, did you have a question there? You want to jump in?
Yes, I did. So, and no more kids in the background, sorry. Whenever you've come into a situation where you're inheriting an individual or the team, when you've taken over as a CEO in different capacities or different jobs, I can imagine that the morale is not necessarily the best in some of these positions and with some of these individuals. How do you go about helping people get on board, and those people who have been just kind of skating along and just kind of stuck in their mundane jobs? How do you motivate them, and how do you bring about the becoming and doing everything with an intention?
Okay, that's great. You know, it's I have had that. I've had that where I've come in and there's been just a really tough culture, but I've also come in where there's a good culture, but maybe not the great one that we're focused on. And so either way, I think the same things apply. And I think one of the biggest things that we can all do is to really engage with the people and connect with the people in a vulnerable and open way. And I say that because having spent the last, 15 years of my career as I was active at kind of the top levels, you find that there's this huge filter that people don't want to tell the CEO something that's bad or that is contrary to what the CEO just said. And yet, if they do, then you can learn things. And so I actually would, at that last company, every month we met with every new team member and we talked about the culture of the company and we engaged them to tell us about themselves, and we focused on those things. In our all hands meetings, we always had open forum, if you will, so they could ask any question they want. And if they didn't want to ask it in person, they could ask it in advance, or now, these days via text and instant messaging, things like we do here, but anonymously, so that they could feel comfortable. But the main thing was to get a truly open dialogue, because you have to respect where people are coming from. Whatever they're feeling, that's their truth. And if you don't honor that first, then they're not going to listen to anything that you have to say. And so I think that's very important. And I remember talking to people, and you would say it over and over again, but you didn't know if it landed. But I'd say, I love it when people challenge me. And that half the people listening to you go, yeah, sure you do. I'm not risking my job for that. And so one time I was in a meeting and we were doing some brainstorming, and I threw out an idea, and one of the guys said, and in brainstorming, you generally don't want to challenge an idea, just keep putting them up there. But as we got to the point of fine tuning them, somebody really was kind of pulling apart this one suggestion I had. And I said, oh, well, okay, tell me more. Why is it not a great way to go? And he gave the explanation. It was perfect. Well, I not only thanked him for helping us not go down the wrong path, but I really made a big deal of the fact that you were willing to challenge me, regardless of how many levels there were in between us, and that we absolutely had to have that, not just between me and them, but between all of us as team members, because we sometimes get so caught up in being polite or not challenging that we just lose. And if you're ever going to break through a barrier, whether it's a bad culture or low morale or whatever it is, if people don't feel like they can say and express what's at the root of their roadblocks, if you will, then you just never get past it. Does that help? Okay, great. Do you have any more, Brent?
Let's see. Anyone else want to chime in? Thanks, Gabe. Appreciate that as always. Kristen?
Yes.
I see Kristen. Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So my question was, do you try to be intentional when you are like relaxing or in your downtime and that type of thing? Because I wouldn't say that anything that I do is very intentional or productive or towards any life or professional goals in my downtime. So do you try and make it more intentional, or is that time specifically to be not intentional?
That's a great question.
The wrong things on Netflix, Kristen. You need to.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know how intentional I was being when I spent however many hours watching Tiger King earlier this year, but I do though think there's a combination. So, for instance, lately I haven't read any business books in a while. I used to read them all the time. I still do read business articles. I still do write some. But more, I'm just trying to read something that I enjoy and just relax and enjoy. But my daughters, especially the one in Australia, who's kind of an activist at heart, reached out to me and said, "Dad, you need to read White Fragility," which she was telling me before everything has kind of blown up wonderfully, or at least for a good purpose in our world these days. And so now when I'm kind of down and I'm just going to take time to read, and I don't feel like I'm having to do this, I'm just saying, okay, I'm going to take some time to read, and this time I'm going to read something that's important instead of something that just gives me pleasure. I love to watch TED Talks. So instead of, again, watching Tiger King or NCIS, or, well, if you guys haven't seen Magic for Humans, it's such a fun show. But I'll watch TED Talks, and those, I think, are the same in that you're being entertained, if you will, but it's kind of taking you to somewhere and helping you get to a place maybe you couldn't get to on your own. So I think it can be both, but certainly I wouldn't say it's reasonable to expect that you're always intentional. Sometimes the intention is I'm chilling and I don't care. There's no boundaries, there's no rules, there's no criteria. I'm just doing this for me. I will say, Brent, while you're working on any others, I will say, I do think it's important as you're planning your time for yourself, that's, you do give some thought to that balance of how much of that time are you just spending like watching a Tiger King, or how much are you investing in, you're going for walks, you're exercising, you're doing whatever it is to feed your soul, kind of a thing. I remember there were times back in Arizona where I would say to my wife, it's not that I want to go hike, I need to go hike. I need to get out right now and get away, because being in nature and focused by myself and in nature just fills me back up, and then I can come back and do more powerful things. So, yeah, there's times I watch Lion King, Tiger King, whatever it was. That was such a bizarre show.
Indeed, very entrepreneurial though. For anybody who's
Yeah.
not seen it, if you want a lesson in small business entrepreneurship, Tiger King will give you a master class in those topics. So, Rick, yeah, again, I'm going to encourage folks to chime in, raise their hand, unmute. Oh, good, Sarthik is back. But Sarthik, yeah, before you ask your question, I just want to remind everybody, the reason Rick is here is to help us, establish a competitive advantage for ourselves. So let's hear from Sarthik first, but Rick, maybe we could wrap up and you could kind of end by telling us how this power of intentionality or any of the methods that you've introduced here can make all of these participants more competitive within an organization, more successful, give them a stronger ability to what everyone's collective goal here is, to make the world a better place. How can this be acutely leveraged to make them really be a force for good moving forward? So just draw the connection back to, hey, this is a superpower that Rick is providing to us. How can we leverage this to make ourselves and our organizations and our world better? So Sarthik, go ahead, please do jump right in.
Hey, so I usually find myself in situations wherein if I'm trying to pursue something, I'm naturally intentional about it. But I would like to know, like, if we are exploring an adventure territory, or let's say trying to learn something new, then how do we inculcate the skill of being intentional doing that?
Well, I think, if you're pursuing something new, one is to understand, well, why am I pursuing this? Is there something I want to get out of it? Is there some specific goal that it's going to help me achieve? Even if it's just for self-fulfillment, but at least be, first of all, clear what that goal is. And then as you go about it, to be then intentional on pursuing that endeavor. So, whether it's reading books or watching TED Talks or connecting with people that you respect their views on that area that you're pursuing, but try to be well-rounded in the way that you approach that. And again, keep yourself focused on, why am I doing this? Because then you can sort of filter out the stuff that really isn't that impactful, because on almost any subject, you can find probably half of what's out there is just almost a waste of time to soak in, and the other half of it is just gold. And so you have to, again, be very thoughtful about, one, seeking it out, two, filtering it to make sure that you're, again, investing your time in that endeavor in the most powerful way. And then just make sure that you use it in some way. And one of the things I started, again, fairly late in life, was doing some journaling. And it can be so loose, I'll call it. But if you kind of get yourself in a habit of writing down some key takeaways or thoughts, and the biggest thing to get away from when you're journaling is to put some filter about how well it has to be written. It's really just about you capturing something that's on your heart or on your mind, or something that you were exposed to that you just don't want to forget. Because one, choosing to write it down helps you remember it. Having it to go back and look on, again, maybe it's some intentional time that you're saying, I want to go back and kind of re-soak in some of these things that were important enough for me to write down before. I think all that can be very powerful. And it's a weird diversion here, but it's tied. My wife and I, actually, we celebrated our 42nd anniversary here recently. And one of the things we started early on was an anniversary journal. So we would only write in it once a year on our anniversary. But now what happens is 42 years later, you don't even have time when you're sitting at dinner or on your anniversary dinner to look back over 42 years worth of entries, but you can, go back and say, oh yeah, this is when we met these people. And remember when this happened in our lives. And so we have this rich history of our time together of what was important enough for us to write down that particular year. And then it's just this great tradition that we carry forward. And I would say to you, that can be true for any part of your life, that just taking that time to write it down and revisiting it at some appropriate time can be very powerful. Hope that helps answer that. And then Brent, to your point, I love, changing the world, making it a better place. I think, it's almost, when I read my 3 goals, I was disappointed in myself that I hadn't written something 40 years ago that was something like that. It was all about me. And I was like, well, I want to make a lot of money, and I want to travel the world, and I want to live on a ranch. The heck with the rest of the world. And I'm thrilled that we are in a time where, especially the younger generation is showing us a more powerful way to focus our energy and attention, and the importance of making that kind of change. So one thing is definitely, as you're setting your goals, think about that, you know, as you're approaching, and this is so far off in the future for you guys, but as you're approaching the end of your career or life or whatever, if you're really looking back, what do you want to say about your life? You want to be able to say about your life. And if it doesn't include something about making the world a better place, there's probably, you know, room for you to think about that again. And then the other thing is, again, the true power of intention is making sure that you don't lose sight of those things. So as we look how to invest our time, as we look to setting our priorities, whether it's for the life or the 5 years or this next year or next month, is be very focused on that. And then down to the day-to-day time, make sure that you're thinking about what kind of impact you can be having every moment. And again, don't set too high of a standard for that. I guess I'm finding out from my kids that they don't even use Facebook anymore. And they said, Dad, that's your older generation's thing now. We've moved on. But I still do a bit on Facebook. And I found myself saying, gosh, I'm still posting a lot of what I post, you know, pictures of the ranch and the garden that I built and, you know, whatever kind of stuff. And should I really be more capturing the moment and sharing more about what's important that's going on in the world? And what about my life experiences from going to South Africa and dealing with people that had come out of apartheid and so forth. So I think it can come down to even that, you know, daily level of keeping your focus on how you can make a difference. And then again, just being very intentional about it. What you say, how you say it, how you invest your time can just make a huge difference, because the time is passing no matter what. It's how we make use of it that is going to change the impact of our lives.
It's fantastic. Well, thank you again, Rick, so much. Really appreciate your time, your energy, your insights, your thoughtfulness, your continued engagement as an ASU Venture Devils venture mentor abroad. I should say not in Arizona. So again, that program is open to anyone worldwide, and you'll know that you'll have venture mentors who are based in Northern California or in London or in Washington, D.C., or wherever it might be. So Rick, thanks for continuing to be a great part of our Sun Devil family. You're getting a lot of kudos on the chat right now. So thanks everyone for coming. And I'll go ahead and stop the recording. And if anyone would like to hang out and maybe ask one or two additional questions to Rick, if he has time, we can do that as well. So
great. Thank you.
Yep.